Jeb Bush speaking. This is his first trip to New Hampshire as a possible presidential candidate, so we wanted to reserve a lot of bonus time to play sound from Jeb Bush today. He took questions both at a Nashua Chamber of Commerce event here, as well as a press availability afterwards. So to kick off our discussion of how Jeb Bush did, let's look at a topic that came up right away in his roundtable with business leaders: immigration.
It's easy to say, well, anything you propose is amnesty, and but that's not a plan. That's a sentiment, perhaps. That's not a plan, and I think the best plan, the most realistic plan, the grown-up plan, if you will, once you control the border and you're confident that there's not going to be another magnet coming, is to say, let's let these folks achieve earned legal status where they work, where they come out from the shadows, get a provisional work permit where they work, where they don't commit crimes, where they don't receive government assistance, where they learn English, and where they make a contribution, because they can make a contribution as well. And apparently that's I don't know what you all think, but that's out of the mainstream these days to think that. I mean, if we just keep people in the shadows, we're not going to solve our immigration problems.
So look, this is his first trip here. I can't help but compare it to his brother's first trip here back in 1999. The crowd of reporters was pretty big. The entourage is much smaller. This is a guy who does not have Texas state troopers. And on immigration and on Common Core, which we'll talk about in a second, compared to Romney, compared to McCain, even compared to his brother to some extent, when he's asked about these tough things, he doesn't get nervous, he doesn't get defensive. I thought, even though his position is still going to be controversial, he handled it pretty well.
Well, I do too. You know, I think that there's going to be some part of the Republican Party for whom his position is going to be amnesty, and he's never going to win those people over. But for the people who are persuadable, I think he offers as solid an answer as you can have for the position that he has.
After he finished and he did the press avail, he got asked, why have you switched from supporting legal status to, or citizenship to legal status? Again, he explained it pretty calmly. Let's go on. I want to get to more sound. Jeb Bush in the roundtable on Common Core.
I've learned, though, that because something's controversial, or you have a view that, as you know, the narrative, the so-called political narrative has been built up, you don't abandon your core beliefs. You go persuade people, as I've tried to do right now, about why I'm for higher standards. And those that have been implementing them and have had a hard time dealing with this because there is political heat around it, they'll have their chance to sort that out in their own way. The way I've sorted it out is, I think you need to be genuine. I think you need to have a backbone. I think you need to be able to persuade people. This is a national crisis. This is a national priority. Our country will not be as vibrant and as dynamic as it needs to be unless we dramatically improve education outcomes in this country.
Again, New Hampshire Republicans and the establishment wing of the party, which is a lot, as well as independents, I think are going to love that answer. Even those who don't like Common Core, the ones who detest Common Core, won't like any answer. But to me, if he can talk about it that way, he can diffuse it for a lot of New Hampshire Republicans.
Well, according to our poll, you know, only about 20% of New Hampshire Republicans think this is a deal killer, the Common Core thing. And I actually think it's more important than that. I think for Jeb Bush, it's a test of character for him to stick with his position. And on top of that, it fits into what we always want from a candidate, which is a theory of the case. It's part of what his argument is about how to fix the economy. And I think he's very, very strong on this issue. Again, there will be some who will reject him because of it, but boy, I actually think it is it's actually going to be an asset for him and not a liability.
I want to play one more quick piece of sound, which is on ISIS. During the roundtable, one of the business people said, what would you do about ISIS as president? He gave an answer that was more detailed, I think, we think, than he's given in the past.
The best idea I've seen on this, and it would be if someone was president and I was advising them, it would have to be vetted, is to create a protected zone in northeast Syria where you could allow for an army to be built, both a Syrian Free Army and international soldiers with the air power of the United States, intelligence capability, and training, that you could engage and isolate ISIS in that fashion.
Again, he doesn't have a lot of foreign policy experience, but it's another topic. He knows it's in the news. He talked about Iran during the press avail, said he wouldn't necessarily have signed the letter. But I didn't say that, but he sort of dodged the question of the Senate letter on Iran. But it continues to understand that for a lot of Republicans, talking about what Obama's done wrong is enough on a lot of foreign policy questions. On ISIS today, he went a little further than that.
Yeah, he went a little further. I still think this, to me, is one of the areas where he's weakest, and I think, you know, he sounded fine on this issue, on this argument, but he has nothing like the fluency that he had on the immigration argument, or the immigration issue, or the Common Core issue when he gets into foreign policy territory. He's a little more tentative, it seems to me.
He handled the press scrum here like a pro. And again, small thing to some extent, but he faced 70 reporters, lots of cameras, a very crowded space, and he's just not, doesn't get thrown, chatted with reporters. Again, in New Hampshire, you got to be able to do that, particularly because right now he's traveling with 4 or 5 aides and not a big entourage, no law enforcement to clear the way for him. Handled it like a pro.
Right. He seems to be, so far on this tour around the early states, from Nevada to Iowa and now to New Hampshire, on the basis of the evidence that we've seen, doing pretty well at the retail level.